The Atlantic Ocean has always been a spot where powerful nations play a quiet game of tag. But in early January 2026, the game came to a crashing halt. In a move that has sent huge waves of worry through every major city from Washington to Moscow, the United States Navy carried out a high-stakes mission to take a Russian tanker called the Bella 1. This was not just some small disagreement between world leaders. Instead, it was a scary moment where big ships and weapons almost started a global war. What happened next was not just a simple argument, but a terrifying time involving submarines, threats to sink American ships, and a show that everyone watched live on their phones. This was not just about oil. It was about who really owns the oceans in 2026. With time running out, a single mistake could have changed the world forever. The drama began in the cold, gray hours of a January morning. The Bella 1, which some secret agents also called the Marinera, was a giant ship carrying something the US government said was against the law. It was filled with millions of barrels of oil from Venezuela that was supposed to be blocked from being sold. The ship was trying to sneak past the US Navy by using a very old trick that many sailors call the ghost ship move. The ship changed its flag in the middle of the ocean to show Russian colors. The crew hoped that the Russian flag would act like a keep out sign to the US Coast Guard and Navy. They thought the US would be too scared to touch a Russian ship. They were wrong. The US Navy had been watching this ship for a very long time, using satellites and planes that fly high in the sky. They knew exactly where the ship was and where it was going. The leaders in Washington had a big choice to make. Let the ship go and look weak, or stop it and risk a fight with Russia. They chose to fight. They knew that if they didn't act fast, the ship would get close to Russian waters, where they couldn't touch it anymore. The helicopters descended, but no one knew if the crew would fight back. As the tanker moved through deep waters that don't belong to any country, the US military launched a perfectly timed move. Before any Russian warships or submarines could get there to protect it, US Navy helicopters were already circling in the air. The sound of loud engines filled the air as the sailors prepared to jump onto the moving ship. Viral videos caught by people nearby and shared by news sites showed how fast and how scary the move was. The helicopters hovered so low that the salt water from the ocean sprayed up against the side of the tanker. The whole plan depended on MH-60 Seahawk helicopters that hovered low over the choppy water behind the Bella 1. Special teams performed fast rope jumping, sliding down ropes onto the deck while the ship was still moving fast through the waves. A second helicopter provided air cover from above, while a big US destroyer ship followed from a distance. Its shape against the sunset was a scary reminder of how much power the US has. The crew of the Bella 1 didn't even have time to call for help before the American teams had control of the steering room. By the time the Russian warships showed up on the horizon, the American flag was already being moved into place. The US had won the race by just a few minutes. It was a moment that made everyone realize that the ocean was no longer a safe place for anyone trying to break the rules. Moscow's response was swift, and it carried a threat that could end civilization. The answer from Moscow came fast and was very mean and angry. For President Vladimir Putin, taking the ship wasn't just about losing some oil. It was a huge embarrassment for the Russian Navy. He felt like the US had slapped him in the face in front of the whole world. The order was given to fire, leaving the world holding its breath for the first explosion. Behind the oil lay a secret that the global powers would take over to keep hidden. To understand why the US would take such a big risk, we have to look at how the world was changed. The rules of the ocean are being rewritten, and the US wants to make sure it is the one holding the pen. Venezuela has more oil than almost anywhere else in the world, but because of its leader, Maduro, many Western countries don't want to trade with them. The US says that the money from ships like the Bella 1 doesn't help the poor people of Venezuela. Instead, it helps keep leaders in power by paying for the government to stay in charge, even when people are unhappy. It also, furthermore, the Russia-China team has spent billions of dollars on Venezuelan oil to get around US rules. They are trying to create a secret way to buy and sell energy so they don't have to listen to what the US says. A new rule was written in blood, and the Atlantic Ocean is about to become a graveyard. Taking the Bella One follows a new plan the US made in 2025. This plan says that any ship carrying banned goods can be taken by the military. The US is done just closing bank accounts. Now they are physically grabbing the things that help their enemies grow strong. This is a much tougher way of doing things than we've seen in the past. The US showed off its power with helicopters and a massive destroyer,
Get your fresh fruit here.
while Russia tried to show its strength using its super quiet submarines. The ship named Bella, one of the Marinera, which was carrying between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil, was taken in international waters of the Atlantic Ocean. As the footage went viral, the true battle began in the hearts and minds of billions around the world. As the videos of the boarding went viral, the internet turned into a global battlefield of words. While some people shouted that America was finally showing its true power as kings of the sea, others warned that this kind of cheering could lead to a war that would eliminate everyone. We're playing with fire here, and we're all going to get burned. Stop this madness before it's too late. The tension got even worse as people started to wonder what the ship was actually carrying. Rumors began to spread that the ship was carrying far more than just oil, with some guessing it had nuclear parts or high-tech gear for the Venezuelan military. This mystery made the situation feel even more dangerous for the online audience. And just as everyone expected a missile strike, the Russian ships suddenly stopped, right at the edge of the US keep-out area. This peaceful pause was not just a sign of surrender, but it was a smart way to stay alive. Military experts revealed that the Black Hole submarine had been detected and tracked by US aircraft long before it could strike. Realizing that they were being watched and were put in a bad spot against the surrounding American fleet, the Russian Navy chose to stay safe rather than look tough. Knowing that a single shot would lead to the total loss of their ships in the area, the ships stopped moving, but a silent attack was already tearing through the shadows. Russia quickly switched to a different method of getting back at the US to make up for being embarrassed in public. Within 48 hours of the seizure, advanced cyber attacks began targeting the US energy grid. Reports came out of glitches causing flickering lights in major cities and strange behavior in oil plant systems. At the same time, the Kremlin moved to crank up the pressure in the cold north. By sending more soldiers and boats to the Arctic, Russia made it clear that they planned to block travel routes. The message was clear. If their ships were stopped in the Atlantic, Western access to the north would be cut off. With China jumping into the fight and accusing the US of breaking the law, it was obvious that the conflict was nowhere near over. The battle had simply moved from the open sea to a new frontier, where keyboards and strategic blockades are just as deadly as any bomb. Caught between two giants, the sailors realized that their lives were merely pawns in a deadly game. While the big leaders were arguing, the people on the ship were caught in the middle of a nightmare. The crew of the Bella One was made up of sailors from many different countries. When the American soldiers landed on the deck, these sailors had to put their hands up and hope they wouldn't be hurt. They were moved to a safe part of the ship while the Americans took over the controls. For these regular workers, the high-stakes game of kings and presidents felt very real and very scary. They didn't care about the oil or the sanctions. They just wanted to get home to their families. The US Navy made sure that they were treated well, but the fear of being in the middle of a battle stayed with them. The tanker reached the shore, but the real nightmare was only just beginning. The world is watching the Bella One as it's towed toward a port in the United States. This ship is now a symbol of a new time, where the ocean is a place of constant tension. Every country with a navy is now looking at their own ships and wondering if they're safe. The events of January 2026 have changed the way we think about safety on the high seas. Some experts believe that this will lead to more ships being taken in the future. If the US can take a Russian ship, what's stopping Russia from taking an American ship? The eye for an eye way of thinking could make the oceans a very dangerous place for anyone who travels for work or fun. We might see more ghost ships trying even harder to hide, and more submarines lurking in the dark corners of the world's oceans. The rules of engagement have changed, and the next strike will come from where we least expect it. Taking the Bella One is a huge turning point. It proves that in 2026, The US is willing to use its soldiers and ships to stop money from going to its enemies. This is true even if it means almost starting a war with a country that has nuclear weapons. This move showed that the US is not afraid to take big risks to keep its spot as the world leader. For Putin, what happened is a loud reminder that the Russian Navy has limits when it is far away from home.
At 1,200
It showed the world that
she's
even
one
with
of the
scary
largest
submarines,
vessels to navigate
they can still be
these
found
waters.
and stopped. For the rest of us, it's a sign that the quiet of the ocean is gone. The blue waters of our world are now part of a big, messy struggle for power. As the tanker gets closer to the American shore, the big question is still there. What will the next ship be carrying? And will the Russian submarine stay quiet a second time? The world is waiting to see who makes the next move in this dangerous game of chess on the water. I'll see you in the next one.